If this device fails, my entire career is over. Steve Jobs stood backstage, gripping the sleek prototype of the iPhone in his hands. The auditorium was filled with reporters, tech enthusiasts, and industry leaders. The air buzzed with anticipation. The year was 2007, and the world had never seen anything like what he was about to unveil. A single device that could make calls, send emails, browse the internet, and play music. No keyboard, just a touch screen. But there was a problem. The iPhone was glitching. If Steve pressed the wrong app, it could crash. If the Wi-Fi cut out, the demo could fail. The engineers backstage whispered nervously as Jobs walked toward the stage. "Should we delay?" one of them asked. Steve didn't answer. He took a deep breath, forced a half smile, and stepped into the spotlight. The audience erupted into applause. The cameras flashed. He raised the iPhone. "Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything," he began. The next few minutes would determine whether the world was ready for the future or if it would laugh him off the stage. Steve had been here before. In 1983, he had envisioned a world where personal computers were in every home. People had laughed. In 1998, when he introduced the iMac, critics mocked its colorful design. Now he was unveiling a device that eliminated the keyboard entirely. People were used to buttons. They trusted them. Could they trust a glass screen? As he navigated through the demo, Steve felt the sweat on his palms. The iPhone wasn't ready, not completely. The battery drained too fast. The touchscreen was sensitive to moisture. The internet connection was unstable. But Steve had learned a crucial lesson. People don't buy products. They buy into ideas. He wasn't just selling a phone. He was selling the future. The demo continued. Everything seemed to be working, until it didn't. Suddenly, an app froze. A second of silence felt like an eternity. The room held its breath. Steve didn't panic. He laughed, made a joke, and moved on. The moment passed, but deep inside, he knew the world wasn't quite ready for this. Would they reject it? Or could he convince them to believe? Steve walked off stage to a standing ovation. The media praised the iPhone as groundbreaking. But behind the scenes, panic set in. Apple's engineers knew what the audience didn't. The phone barely worked. "Steve, we need more time," one engineer pleaded. Steve shook his head. "We don't have time." Apple was already years behind competitors like BlackBerry and Nokia. If they delayed, the entire industry would move forward without them. His solution? Push the team harder. For the next 6 months, his engineers worked day and night, fixing hundreds of bugs. Steve pushed them to the breaking point. "Steve, this is impossible!" one shouted. His response? Real artists ship. To Steve, vision was useless without execution, and he wasn't here to be remembered for ideas. He was here to change the world. The countdown to launch had begun. But what if they couldn't pull it off in time? 2 weeks before launch, Apple engineers faced a nightmare. The iPhone's touchscreen froze at random moments. The call function dropped audio. The battery life was worse than expected. The tension was unbearable. Steve was relentless. It has to work. He was known for demanding perfection. But now, perfection seemed impossible. One night, a lead engineer snapped. "Steve, you don't understand. We can't fix everything in 2 weeks." Steve stared at him. His voice was calm. "Then fix what matters most." The engineer blinked. Steve knew something that most people didn't. Perfection is an illusion. The key was to get the right things right. So they prioritized. They fixed the crashes, the battery issues, the major bugs. But was it enough? The world was about to find out. The first iPhone went on sale on June 29th, 2007. Apple stores were flooded. People camped outside for days. As Steve watched from his office, something incredible happened. People weren't just buying a phone, they were buying into a future they didn't fully understand yet. The touchscreen? They embraced it. The lack of a keyboard? They adapted. The internet on a phone? It became essential. Steve had done it. But there was one thing he didn't expect. The iPhone wasn't just a success. It was the beginning of a revolution. This wasn't just about calls or emails anymore. This was about the future of human connection. Over the next decade, the iPhone changed everything. It killed the traditional camera, the radio, the alarm clock, even paper maps. Steve had predicted touchscreens would replace buttons, but even he didn't foresee how deep the iPhone would reshape the world. Businesses were built on the App Store. Social media became a global force. Entertainment, news, and culture all shifted to mobile. But Steve wouldn't live to see the full impact of his vision. In 2011, as he battled cancer, he told a close friend, "I'm just sad I won't see what comes next." Steve's legacy wasn't just the iPhone, it was the idea that the future belongs to those bold enough to create it. People don't know what they want until you show it to them. His greatest strength was seeing possibilities where others saw limitations. Even in his absence, his vision lived on. Every touchscreen phone, every app, every smart device. His fingerprints were on all of it. The question now wasn't about what Steve Jobs built. It was about who would have the courage to build next. In a dimly lit garage somewhere, a young entrepreneur stares at their laptop. They have an idea. Something crazy. Something impossible. But history has taught them one thing. Every once in a while, a revolutionary idea comes along that changes everything. Steve Jobs had one. Now it's someone else's turn. Could that someone be you? Years after the first iPhone launch, the world had changed beyond recognition. Smartphones were no longer a luxury. They were an extension of human existence. Apple had continued to innovate, but without Steve Jobs' leadership, something felt different. The company was growing. Profits were soaring. Yet some whispered that the visionary spark had dimmed. But Steve had always known this moment would come. Before he passed, he gathered Apple's senior executives for a final message. Not about profits, not about dominance, about the future. Don't just make better products. Make things that change how people live. Think bigger. Take risks. Don't be afraid to break what works to build something greater. Those words echoed in the halls of Apple Park for years to come. Then, one day, a young engineer, fresh out of college, inspired by Jobs' philosophy, walked into a design meeting. He had an idea, a crazy idea. The team dismissed him. Impossible. People aren't ready for this yet. He smiled. That's exactly what they said to Steve Jobs in 2007. He placed his phone on the table. This is what comes next. Somewhere in the world, a child picked up their first iPhone. Their tiny fingers swiped across the screen, eyes filled with curiosity. To them, this wasn't technology. It was the way the world worked. They had never known a world without it. Steve Jobs had once said, "Innovation is about seeing the future before anyone else does." But the real challenge was something greater, shaping the future so the world can catch up. Now the question remains, who will be the next Steve Jobs? Will it be you? Blast off. Last.